Okay, we're going to do the laws of Berachos. You can follow along in the Art Scroll Laws of Berachos. I've tried to organize the shir according to the book, so if you have any question, you want to look anything up, you should be able to find it in order using the table of contents. I also use Sharei HaBracha, another sefer as well, but I organized everything according to the Art Scroll book to make it, I think, a lot easier for people. Now, just to give a background, so Anshe Knesset Gedola and Ezra, right, the sages of the Great Assembly, they made the format of the bracha. That's around 350 BCE. So it's very important to try and follow the format. However, what are the necessary components to a bracha? You have to say the word Baruch. You have to say one of Hashem's names, so either Hashem or Elokeinu, and you have to say Melech HaOlam, that he's King of the universe. Now, of course, any one of the seven names here would work. Usually, it's only Hashem and Elokeinu. But you have to say one of the names, one of these seven names. You're not supposed to say one of the names of Hashem. You have to say one of those names here. And of course, that he's blessed and King of the universe, like we said. You shouldn't veer, of course, from the main content. That's also very important. You have to say that. In terms of long and short brachas, okay, this is very important. So short brachas, very easy. They're just one sentence. Long brachas, they're about a paragraph. They start usually with one of these like short brachas and end with a short bracha. I suppose the first one kind of veers into the whole paragraph. Now, if you have one long bracha beside or a bracha right beside a long bracha, sometimes it doesn't start with Baruch Atah, like in the brachas of Kriya Shema, for example. Where is this applicable? Well, in the morning we say Elokai Neshama, right? This is kind of a long bracha in a way. It doesn't start with a bracha, however, it ends with a bracha, a long paragraph. And therefore, some people are careful to say a different bracha right before, like Asher Yatzar, right, that Hashem formed us, and that's connected as well to the long bracha of Elokai Neshama. This is a very good idea. Okay, now in terms of the language, you should say with Hebrew, even if you can't understand it. Let's say you can't speak Hebrew, or you're still working on it. So then it should be an official language you understand. You have to understand it. Esperanto would not be a good language, therefore. And you have to be very careful, right, with translation of words. So that's why it's useful to say the Hebrew. Now, you have to pronounce it with your lips. You can't just think it, not good enough. There are exceptions, someone's sick, whatever that might, or speak to a rabbi. Now, in terms of the meaning of the names, a person should know the meaning of the names. Elokeinu, he's the source of all force or power. Koyach. Hashem means he was, is, and will be. A person should have that in mind every time they say one of Hashem's name in a bracha. Yeah, it means take it slow. Some people, for example, when they first wake up in the morning, they'll say every time I'm going to say Hashem's name like Hashem, Yod Kei Vav Kei, I mean was, is, and will be. And so at least they're starting off their day right. They're putting that intention into the word. And of course, they should still think of what it means. It's not an excuse exactly, but it is a good piece of advice. And to get in the habit of. Now, when a person says Hashem, right, this is very important. The vowel is like underneath this nun, like the little t is called a kamatz, and the patach under the nun is no good. So what's the difference? So this is like AI ending, and this is like OI ending. So I'm going to stress it a little bit, but this would, and I'm going to replace the dalet with a mem, so it's like amonoi, right, except the mem is de, like ado. So amonoi, right, stressing that, versus Amonai, right? Person should not say Amonai, that's not Hashem's name, that's my master. Amonoi, that's God's name. Once again, I'm not going to pronounce it with the dalet. Okay, what are bad brachas? So a bracha levatala, we don't want to waste Hashem's name, right? That's an issur in the Torah. It's prohibited to waste Hashem's name, and therefore, if you have no real reason you're making a bracha, you don't make a bracha. You don't say Hashem's name for no reason. For learning, for other things like that, you could. As you can see, I'm still being careful. Bracha she'eina tzricha, this is sadly more common. You made a bracha that you really didn't need to. And we'll talk about all of those. When is it you don't need to? When do you need to? Right, all of that will come up eventually. Now, let's say you say Baruch Atah Hashem, right? And you realize you don't need to make a bracha, or it's a bracha she'eina tzricha, whatever it might be. So then you're going to say Lamdeni chukecha. You're going to say, why? That's the end of a verse in Tehillim, right? So therefore, you're not wasting Hashem's name. You're saying a verse in Tehillim. Let's say you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. You say the second name of Hashem. Now you can no longer continue this verse anymore, right? Unless you got rid of one of Hashem's name. So instead, at that point, you're going to say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elam Vaed, right? Just like you put his name kind of through the, you showed not enough value to Hashem's name. So now we're going to be masak, and we're going to fix that by showing value to Hashem and his name. And you can look up the translation. I'm sure there's multiple levels, but that Hashem should be blessed and have honor. His name should have honor. His kingdom should have honor for now and forever. And I'm sure there's a lot of depth to that. And we say it the second line after Kriya Shema, right? So the second line silently to ourselves. So we don't want to waste that line either. But to be masakin this mistake, you could. Okay, Safek Berachos Lahakel. A person has to be careful with his Hashem's name, and therefore, when we're in doubt, we don't use Hashem's name. Of course, that means if you don't know if you do something, you ask a rabbi. You don't just eat food. Oh, I don't know the right brachas, I'll just eat food. Or I'll make the wrong bracha that'll technically cover this. Nah, figure out the right thing to do. That's the right thing to do. You don't just say, Safek Berachos Lahakel, oh, I won't do it anymore. No, you have to ask a rabbi. You have to learn like you're doing right now, right? Once again, this shear, I should say, it's going to be very hard for you to paskin from. But we're going to give you all the depth in terms of knowing what's a good question, what's a bad question, giving you a very, very fast overview of hopefully everything that's applicable in brachas. But it's going to be very hard to cover everything. I might not even cover everything written in this sheet, which hopefully will be made available. Just find the link around somewhere where you're seeing this video or listening. Okay. Going further, now we say Safek Berachos Lahakel, that's for specifically a rabbinic bracha. Biblical is pretty simple. You would need to redo the bracha. So for example, benching, you make a mistake in benching, you have to repeat it. Once again, hopefully you'll be able to consult an art scroll siddur or your rabbi, right? Or if you're not sure if you benched or not, right? You can't remember. Some people can't remember what they ate. So you remember what you ate, but you can't remember if you bench. You have to bench again. That's a simple idea. Once again, ask a rabbi. There might be particulars here, but benching is a deraisa until the fourth bracha, uvenei shleim. After that, it's rabbinic. So up to and including that bracha. Main shalosh, there's a disagreement. So, for example, person ate a cake, drank wine, had a date, or a fit, the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael. So then they have to say main shalosh is disagreement whether that's a rabbinic or a deraisa bracha. What are you going to do in that situation? Hopefully you'll have someone else say Ma'in Shalish for you, or we'll talk about other ways out of it where in a doubt you could solve it. In terms of the Torah, right, Asher Bachar Banu, that is a Doraisa, that's a Torah obligation, and therefore, if you're not sure you made a bracha on the Torah, you have to make that bracha. However, like we said, we don't want to waste Hashem's name. So if someone's getting up to lane, just tell them, have me in mind when you're making the bracha and laning in the shul. So have me in mind with your bracha, or ask to get an aliyah. Or, of course, when a person says Ahava Rabbah, right, the second bracha in the morning of Kriya Shema, hopefully a person says that, and they should have in mind that that's going to be their bracha on the Torah. And then after, when you're done and you can interrupt your davening, then you say the psukim and say the learning for after having made the bracha, right? After Asher Bachar Banu, you'll find in the siddur, there's 3 things you say. All right, now, let's say a person's in Safek, or Rav Akiva Eiger does suggest that another way here is to say Baruch Atah, and to think, we said thinking doesn't work, but to think the names of Hashem and then continue the bracha out loud. Once again, not saying Hashem's name. It's not the best solution, but it is a solution when you don't have another option. Okay, let's say you have a mistake in food, so you think you're holding you think it's wine, and it turns out it's water. So then, let's say it's the person says, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, they're about to say Bori Priya Gafen, right, blessing on wine. Now, you could switch. You just say, before you say that part, you just say Shakol Ni'im B'dvaro, you say the right bracha. However, let's say you didn't do that. That's the best thing. Let's say you didn't do that. You said the wrong bracha entirely. Well, if it's Toikadei Dibur, it's within 3 seconds. For example, the time it takes you to say Shalom Lechem Rebbe, right? So if it's within roughly that time, so then you just make the correction. So a person says Bori Priya Gafen at the end of their bracha, Shakol Ni'im B'dvaro, they say it quickly enough, soon enough. If not, they have to repeat the whole bracha. Right? Didn't work. Now, how do you avoid these issues? So the right way to make a bracha is to say the bracha out loud, to hold it in your main hand, your dominant hand, right? A righty is a righty, a lefty is a lefty. To be still, not to be walking, not to be doing things. The food should be ready, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the food should be ready, your mouth should be empty. Now, what happens, for example, a person takes a bite of an apple, and they realize, oh, I didn't make a bracha. So what do you do then? So the best thing is to spit it out and to make the bracha. Now, that's disgusting in front of other people, so either leave from other people, or you push the food to the side of your mouth, you make the bracha. Now, with liquid, it's a lot harder. You might just have to go to a washroom or whatever it is and spit the food out. Unless it's a very, very small amount of liquid, I don't know. Or, If you can't push it to the side, you have to spit it out. If it's a liquid or something like that, or it's too full in your mouth, then yeah, you're gonna have to figure out another way. But you have to make a bracha. You can't eat that food. So you should have an empty mouth. You should always have that. Head covering for a man, very important. You can use the sleeve if you don't have your kippah on, but you shouldn't just use your hand. Doesn't count. You could maybe use someone else's hand. Okay, these things are something you should ask a rabbi when's the right thing to do things and not. Okay, but in terms of foul odor, this is very important. So Mishnah Brura or Chaim, these are the simanim like ayin hey, those areas and before and after about, let's say, person's not covered up. What do you do? Or foul odor. These are very important. People are not makpid, sadly, with soiled diapers to check their baby. Let's say they're holding their baby, they should check it to make sure that it's not a bad diaper. And there's all these little rules. So, for example, let's say they're not old enough to have eaten mezainis, like some flour-based product. So then it turns out that the diaper it's not foul enough, and therefore you could make a bracha even with like a baby, like let's say a 1-month-old baby, no problem. You could make a bracha, no problem. However, let's say you're in shul. Child, I think you could probably assume that the child is clean. However, you could also move away from the child, be cognizant of it. Don't pick up someone's kid and smell them. That's for sure not okay. And you should be 6 to 8 feet away from a bad diaper. And let's say there's no physical thing that's right, it's just a smell, someone passes gas or whatever. So then you don't have to be 6 or 8 feet away from where the smell ends. You just have to make sure you can't smell it. But all those are details, and you have to ask a rabbi or learn the sugya in depth. We're not going to go into that right now. An exposed person, whether man or lady, is not okay, right, to see their nude areas. For a lady, the elbows up, the knees up, from the neckline, also have to be covered. A married lady has to cover her hair. Let's say she's not covered her hair. So you look into the sefer, don't look at her. That's what I've noticed a lot of rabbis will do to get out of the situation. Under the chuppah, what are you going to do? You can't get away. She's standing there. So you look somewhere where you can't see all of these things. Otherwise, yeah, it's a problem. Okay, in terms of a hefsek, right, we're still in bad brachas, so an interruption. So if you make a verbal interruption, now even noises, just tunes, or even just a wink, you shouldn't do these things. You don't repeat the bracha, but you shouldn't do these things. A single word of an interruption, yes, you need to repeat the bracha. Let's say that the single word or words were for the bracha. For example, he needs the salt, right, for hamotzi or whatever it might be. He needs a knife, I don't know, whatever it's going to be, or he needs the food. So then it's fine. You don't repeat the bracha. You still shouldn't do it. Everything should be ready, right? You shouldn't need to talk, but you don't repeat the bracha. Now, in terms of silence, right? Toichedei dibur, that the same thing. Shalom aleichem Rebbe. You don't want to wait longer, right? It's discouraged. It's okay. It's discouraged. And to give an example of that, when a person makes a motzi during the week, right? They should cut the knife into the bread so that the smaller part, if you pick up the smaller part, the larger part of the challah with the knife in it still won't rip apart. So you don't want to cut too far because you want to have a whole challah. But this is applicable, for example, when is this applicable? At a wedding. You're going to eat the meal with everyone. So you put your knife into the bilka, into the whatever it is, but not so much that it should break apart, right? You want to have a whole challah. On Shabbos, we're very nervous about ruining the challah, so people just make a mark. But this is how little we want to have an interruption. Now, waiting people, what can you do? And same thing, if it's too hot or too cold, you want to make sure, so you don't want to have to not eat it, right? Because you're waiting for it to cool down, you're blowing on it. So just wait, right? Hot soup, if you're going to make a bracha on hot soup, just wait until you're really ready to eat it. Now, a person should swallow the food, right, before they start talking. A person shouldn't talk with a food full of their mouth anyway. But for the bracha as well, you should swallow the food. And it's important to have a kazayis of challah on Shabbos. A person should try and have that. And if your host doesn't give it, okay, you ask them, can I have some more challah? I don't know. That's, once again, not an interruption. It's necessary for the bracha. In terms of amen, a person has to pronounce it properly. So they can't skip the aleph, right? You should wait also, an amen chatufa, you should wait until the person is done making the bracha, right? As this is a very applicable, let's say someone's singing the bracha, and people will say amen too early, before the person's really enunciated the end, right? Bori priya gafen, right? You want to wait for them to actually enunciate that they've said the word, and then you say amen. Okay, and you don't want to say mean, right? Probably not so common. What is common? Person swallows the nun, right? Because they stress the mem too much, right? They say amen, right? That's not good. You want to enunciate the nun, amen. Now, this is sadly very common Well, you don't repeat the amen, but an amen ksara, for example, if it's too short, so it represents, right, it's an acronym for Kel Melech Ne'eman, that Hashem is king and he's trustworthy, he's true, right? He did this thing, right? Person makes a bracha, yes. So it should take the time, amen should take the time for you to say those 3 words, Kel Melech Ne'eman. So not amen, but amen, something longer. Now you don't want to swallow that nun. So you have to be a little bit careful and you want to enunciate each letter. Okay, now you don't want to repeat it louder than the person saying the original thing. That's a little bit funny, right? Someone says something amazing. You say, yes, it's true, louder than they willing to say. It sounds like they weren't as convinced. I don't know. It's a little bit odd. So you don't want to repeat it louder than the person who said it. What's an amen yisoyman, an orphaned amen? So let's say you don't know the bracha in shul. Everyone says amen. Don't just say amen with them. If you know, even if you can't hear, you can say amen. But you should know and hear the bracha. Now let's say there's too long of a pause between the bracha and the word amen. This is also a problem. And so, for example, once again, someone's singing, but this time they say the bracha and then they sing afterwards. You don't want to wait until they're done singing. You just say amen immediately. No problem. Now, when do you not answer amen? So let's say it's a bracha levatala. Now, tefillin shel rosh is not a bracha levatala, chas v'shalom, but we don't say amen to it, to someone else's bracha. In fact, you might want to be careful not to say the tefillin shel rosh bracha out loud for someone to say amen. Same thing in the moed, right? When someone's putting on tefillin, well, you don't make a bracha anyway. But if someone does make a bracha, I don't think it's the correct thing to say amen to that. Let's say someone's learning the bracha, like, especially a child learning a bracha, they're not making it on food, they're just repeating it in class. You don't say amen. Children under 6, they don't really understand what they're saying, so you don't say amen. Now, this could be, for example, a little bit odd, right? Children, they see you listening to the bracha and not saying amen or whatever it might be. So you could say anen with 2 nuns. Now you have to be a little bit careful that people around you aren't going to learn the wrong lesson and say amen. But this way, the children under 6 thinks you're saying amen. It's a real thing. You're taking it seriously. Now, what about a recording? Once again, you don't say amen to such a thing. If everyone's saying amen and you're going to look weird. So once again, I guess you could say amen. I don't know exactly. But once again, you don't want to give the impression, if you're someone who people will look to take an example from, you don't want to say that the minhag is to not say amen. That's what I'll tell you. Now, in terms of a phone, someone gives you a bracha over the phone. What do you do there? So you ask your rabbi. That's the main thing. What are the problems? So, for example, there's a delay, right? Even over the internet, sometimes you have a 10-second delay. That's too long to be able to say amen. What happens if it goes through a garbage the dump? There's diapers, whatever. Does that interrupt the bracha? Does that mean you can't say amen anymore? Right? These questions you have to ask a rabbi. I'm not confident to tell you what the minhag is. Okay, in terms of Ashkenazim, they don't say a bracha, they don't say an amen to their own bracha. There are exceptions, just follow the siddur. For example, Birchas Hamazon, that 4th bracha, V'nei Yerushalayim, that's the end of the Doraisa, and therefore we say amen to interrupt between the rabbinic to show you that separation. You hear 2 simultaneous brachas. What do? You just say amen to one. So you can say amen ve'amen. It's found in Tehillim. This is okay. Let's say someone utters a curse. Well, obviously not going to say amen to that. But let's say at the same time, someone says bari pri eitz. So don't say amen. Don't mess with that, right? Because the amen, you don't want it to look like you're saying amen to a curse. Just avoid that. Okay, moitzi chavero. Let's say a person makes a bracha for someone else. They don't know how to make the bracha or whatever it might be. Common in shuls for the right, the chazan or whatever it is, to make a bracha for everyone. So first of all, you should hear the entire bracha. Why? Because hearing is like speaking, right? When you hear the bracha, it's like you're saying it. Now that means also if the person making the bracha missed a word or they slurred a word, you could insert it and it'll be good for you. It means you have to know the bracha. Maybe you have to have the siddur in front of you, right? They have to be going a little bit slow. You don't want to talk over another word. Now, let's say, for example, you're a guest at someone's house. They just butcher hamotzi or whatever it might be, or we'll say in a second, they intentionally interrupt. So then you have to repeat it. However, you don't want to embarrass them, so you repeat it quietly to yourself. Not a big deal. Now, you should answer amen when you hear a bracha, even if it's being made for you, right? Let's say someone's making a bracha for you to blow shofar, for you to hear shofar. You say amen. If you don't, it's okay. It still works. Now, the person making the blessing should have in mind the people he's making the blessing for. And of course, you should have in mind that you're getting this bracha. Now, if the blesser makes a hefsek, right, he interrupts. If he did it intentionally, it doesn't work. He needs a new bracha, but you also need a new bracha for sure. If it's unintentional, he interrupted, that's okay for you. Now let's say if you, as the listener, interrupt, intentional or not, you have to repeat the bracha. Now in terms of arvus, joint responsibility, so in terms of a mitzvah, you need to do a mitzvah, and you need to make a bracha on it, so therefore I am responsible for you. It's not so true with food, right? You don't need to eat food, you want to eat food, right? Once again, ask a rabbi if you have maybe other scenarios. Now, it's very important, though, that a rabbinic person who's obligated rabbinically should not make the bracha for someone who has a Torah obligation. Okay, we'll talk about that in 1 second. So, for example, actually, just very quickly, women and children, right, when they're doing a mitzvah, many times, not always, but many times, they have a rabbinic obligation, or they're not obligated from the Torah, so therefore, you're not going to be allowed to listen to their bracha and have it work for you as well. Now let's pretend the person doing the bracha has already done their mitzvah d'oraisa. Now, can they make a bracha for someone else who also needs a bracha d'oraisa, let's say? So in that scenario, yes, let's say a man could make a bracha for another person, for another man to hear shofar. A man doesn't make a bracha for, let's say, a lady to hear shofar. She should make the bracha for herself. Unless, of course, he hasn't made the bracha yet, right? He's making for himself and for the lady, no problem. But if he's already made the bracha for himself, he shouldn't be making the bracha for the lady, right? That's, as far as I know, the minhag. Yeah, it's for Ashkenazim and Sephardim, because Sephardim ladies I don't think make a bracha at all. So yeah, for Ashkenazim as well, man will not make the bracha for a lady, she should make the bracha herself. And similarly, a man should not make havdalah for a woman if he already made havdalah for himself. Why? Because it's a machlekes whether she has an obligation to make havdalah or not. Now, of course, the listeners should presumably always make their own bracha. Unless it's a minhag that someone is making the bracha for you, you always make the bracha yourself. Nowadays, it's pretty straightforward. Someone can teach it to you. You can read it, transliterate it, whatever it might be. Okay, in terms of blessings for enjoyment, so I can't take your enjoyment. That's another reason why we don't make birchas hanenin, right? You enjoy it, so how can I make a bracha for you? And therefore, if I'm making the bracha, let's say on an apple, and I'm going to enjoy it, and you're also going to eat an apple, so then I can make a bracha and have you in mind, and you say amen as well. That's not the minhag. The minhag, though, is you always make your own bracha in these scenarios, unless, let's say, it's a meal, like wine, which is very weird nowadays to be kovei on wine, but to have a meal with bread, right? One person makes a motzi for everyone. That's the minhag. But otherwise, you make a bracha for yourself. Now, either way, if you listen, the bracha works for you. Like we said, someone listening is like they're saying it, so it works. Now, in terms of kiddush, this is very interesting, right? You might say it's not a mitzvah, right? It's really birchas hanenin, especially Shabbos day, right? It's boy brigaf, and that's the only bracha. No, person can. This is why I said arvus, where you need to do something, right? Like to do a mitzvah, you're obligated to do a mitzvah. I can make a bracha for you. So by Shabbos day, you need to hear that bracha to be able to eat. So therefore, I can make a bracha for you, even if I've already made the bracha kiddush myself. So certainly kiddush night, but also kiddush day. Person can repeat kiddush for someone else, even if they've heard kiddush themselves, as long as they're obligated to hear kiddush. In terms of hamotzi, you should not make hamotzi for someone else. So someone comes late to your daytime meal, for example, or nighttime meal, make kiddush for them, and then you teach them, right, repeat after me to make hamotzi, or they make hamotzi themselves. This is the best. And of course, if they know how to make kiddush, okay, so make kiddush themselves. What's the problem? Now, an after bracha, if you're obligated to make the after bracha, so then for sure you make it for someone else. That means having gazayas, right? Ask your rabbi what's a gazayas, but generally speaking, right, we say it's an olive, although much larger than olives we have nowadays. So that's why I say ask someone. Right, there's a whole book. This is how much a gazayas is. Okay, but if you ate it, then great, you can make a bracha for someone else. If not, but yeah, but it's okay once again, but you shouldn't. All right, so let's stop here. Thank you so much for listening. Halachos of Berachos, very fast. We're doing an enormous amount. Hopefully you enjoy and come back for the other lessons. And like I say, it's a little bit hard to paskin from this, but nevertheless, yeah, hopefully you're getting all the inyanim, understanding everything going on. You'll know what to ask, and hopefully you'll be able to find this sheet. Thank you so much.